Hey y'all, welcome back to the Lavender Book Company. I'm Kat, and I am going to help you guys go through storyboarding today. So before we get into it, I'm Kat. I'm a children's book author and illustrator, and I wrote The Adventure of Theodore James. I'll pop it up right here for you. I'm very inspired by the classics. All the books that I create will have that classic feel. Everything is like updated for the modern child. So it's just giving them like a little facelift. So here I'm just giving you a behind the scenes on having a small business, what it's like to create children's books, bringing you along the journey with me of creating the children's books and more. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely subscribe. I'd love to have you around. And let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so I had a few people on Instagram. I put up a reel. I'll show what the reel was kind of like. And a few people had wanted me to kind of go through hold on. All right, anyway, so a few people had wanted me to go through my storyboarding process. So I thought I'd bring you guys along with me on that because I can understand why from a new children's book author perspective, it would come across as very overwhelming and not really knowing where to go, because I definitely learned a lot my first time around. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you guys my process. Now, let me just disclaimer. It's a huge disclaimer, okay? I am not like actually professionally trained on how to do this, but I think this is one of those things that everyone's going to have their own kind of process. So whatever works for you is going to work. So don't stress too much about it. You'll kind of find your way, I think, after you kind of go through it at least once, which I think is really important. I think you have to kind of go through it once, and then you realize like, oh, I can cut that. I need to add this in. This works better. And you know what I mean? Things like that. So anyway, we're going to go through the whole thing, and we're going to start with your manuscript. Dang it, I printed it on I printed on cardstock on accident. Dang it. Oh, that was a waste. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, I am working on my second children's book right now. So I will show kind of my rough sketches on the wall and what I'm doing there. But I wanted to show you guys a manuscript, and I clearly didn't want to show my whole manuscript yet because I haven't even announced the title yet, okay? So I got my first children's book manuscript out so I can show you guys my thought process behind it. And of course, I printed it on cardstock on accident, but I'm not going to reprint it. So let me show you guys what I do with this. Okay, so here is the manuscript for my first book, okay? So what I did when I was writing it, I actually imagined the pictures and everything in my head when I was writing this out. Now, this may not come to you in this way, so don't be stressed about that. But so if you end up just writing everything out and then you have to go back and break it up, that's totally fine. But this is the way I just wrote it because this way I saw it in my head, and this is what makes sense. So I know this is technically not like grammatically correct, these like indentations. This is me separating out the spreads in the book. So what I did here was, so this here would be my first spread of the book. So this would be the only text on that spread of the book. So then here would be my second, my third, and so on. So this is how I organized it out, and this is how I determined how many spreads I was going to need. So from there, it's a very easy process. You can see how you're breaking it down, which things you want on which pages, and then that way you can go to the next stage in the process, which is going to be starting the sketching process of the illustrations. But like I have mentioned many, many times before in other videos where I'm talking about publishing a children's book, you want to make sure this is pretty much nailed. Now, it's one thing to change a word or two later down the line. That's one thing. You're wanting this pretty much nailed so you don't waste time on the illustration process. Now, there was actually a time with this book where I actually added in a spread. So that may happen. So, but you're just trying to avoid more time wasted on the other end. So you're just trying to avoid that whole thing, and you're trying to make it as seamless as possible for yourself. So really make sure that the manuscript is nailed before you even move on to illustrations. Don't waste your time. If you still have lots of editing and stuff to do here, then you're just going to waste your time. Okay, so then what I do from there, so once I blocked out all of my pages and my spreads that I'm going to be doing, Then I move into my rough sketches. Now, these are not to scale. Now, if you want to do them to scale, that's your prerogative. That's totally fine. If you're kind of undecided on what size you want the book, I would recommend doing rough sketches first and then doing them to scale before doing your actual final illustrations. Now, for me, I know what size books I'm wanting to do. Most of my books will be an 8x8. That's just my own personal choice, and I'm sticking with it. So I might have a few books for specific reasons, whether I choose to go smaller or larger. That will just depend on those special books, but all my other books are going to be 8x8. I'm doing that for a specific reason. So just keep that in mind when I'm talking about the size of my book. So what I like to do now that I've gone through this whole process once before, and I'll be putting up kind of photos and videos of my layout the first time I did this. Bless my husband's heart, he dealt with those spreads in the kitchen for so long. Those spreads were in the kitchen for so long. It was before I had an extra room down here to work in. And it was kind of before everything kind of snowballed into like making my own publishing company and things like that. So that's why I was up in the kitchen for The Adventure of Theodore James and making that book, because it was before everything snowballed. Oh, that's a big spider. Very unsettled. So what I like to do, so I'm going to flip this around so you guys can see kind of my thought process. Okay, so here is my current work in progress. So this is my second children's book. So every sticky note is correlated to like which spread, and so it's all numbered. This is my manuscript here. The one thing that I have to keep in mind with this book specifically that was different than The Adventure of Theodore James was this is done in like a rhyming style. I have to make sure like the full rhyming phrase is on the same spread. So then that way when you read it, it makes sense. It has that rhyming rhythm to it when you're reading it out loud. I don't want it to be awkward. So that was something that I did need to keep in mind. And some people might wonder, well, how do you know like how to break up your pages and things like that? That's going to be on the author to decide what information is valuable enough to show in a picture and how much of that information you're keeping on the one page, and then when you're needing to move to the next page with new information. So that's kind of totally up to the author. I don't really feel like anyone could really just give like a blanket answer on that. That's definitely like a creative choice. Now with this, so when it comes to the rough sketches phase, so this is just computer paper, it's not to scale. I simply folded it in half. I gave a quick sketch on what I wanted the feel of the spread to be. And then I was able to make sure that I was switching up between a full spread to a half spread. I was mixing up the perspective, the focus, what side of the page the main character is on. I was wanting to mix all that up so then that way when you're actually reading the book, it reads really nicely. It's visually very appealing. And I really, really recommend this process for anyone who's doing a children's book, because I personally see children's books as one long art piece, because the illustrations are so important in telling the whole story that you can't look at them as separate art pieces. They're all one long art piece telling the same story. And so you have to also keep in mind like color and the tone and the size of different things. Like that's all going to play a part in your process. And I feel like I could do a whole nother video just on illustrations. I feel like I've talked a lot about it in the past. But that's definitely a video that I could do if people want me to kind of dive into more on why I did certain illustrations the way I did with my first book and what I'm doing currently. Let me know down below if you'd be curious to like talk about that, because I'd love to talk about it. I feel like I could talk about illustrations in children's books for forever. But so this is how I kind of do most of my storyboarding. Now with this, I do have some here where I had kind of like a first draft and then I decided to cover it. And I really like to look at this for a while before I even start illustrating, because I want to make sure it's going to flow really nicely and it's going to tell the story in the way that I want it to be told. So it's kind of up to you personally if you want to go from this spot and then do more finalized sketches in an actual size, and so that way everything's to scale and you can see it that way. Some people do that. I have decided just to jump from this to my final product, because for me, when I was doing it with The Adventure of Theodore James, it was kind of just very redundant for me personally, and I felt like it was kind of a waste of time. So there are some other little things that I would keep in mind with storyboarding and some things I would really recommend. So I would definitely recommend also doing full in color character drawings. Now I will pop up the ones that I have here. I also had some done for the Adventure of Theodore James. I would also have those hanging up as well. I think it helps you really kind of get into the world. You could even, if you're wanting to stick with certain color palettes or things like that, you could do swatches of all your colors that you're wanting to do. I think it all plays a part in the storytelling process. I also made notes. I kind of did almost like a theme board on my second children's book. So I kind of have like the colors that I want. I have the main character with all of the colored pencil like numbers on there, so I know exactly which ones I'm using. I'm also writing like what mediums I want to be using, what I want the field to be like. I also do that on my manuscript as well. This one for Theodore James was technically like my second rough draft, so I didn't have it up here up top. Before my second book, I do have at the very top, I write down like what I want the book to feel like, how I want it to read, how the main character is, what her character traits are. All that stuff plays a part in the storyboarding, because now you're getting to the part where you're getting with the illustrations to help tell the storyline. So all this stuff kind of plays in with each other. And so those are things I would definitely recommend having. So that is the most simplest way I can come across on the storyboarding part. There's many different parts to making a children's book, like the illustrations, the manuscript, the formatting, all that kind of stuff. But if people wanted me to break that down in different videos, I'd be more than happy to do that. But I really just enjoy kind of showing people kind of the behind the scenes on how children's books are made and like what goes into doing them, because it's not just like writing words on a page and then just, it's like super easy to make the illustrations. Like there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of thought goes into the illustrations. I mean, at least on my side. At least for what I'm doing, there's a lot of thought that goes into them. So, but if you're wanting a specific video on any of those parts of making a children's book, or if you're just curious to see them, I'd be more than happy to share them. Definitely subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to have you around. I have new videos every single Friday, and I just really love sharing my passion with everyone here. So I like showing the behind the scenes on growing my small business, trying to make my children's books, and all of that fun stuff kind of wrapped into those things. And if you like this video, smash the like button. It appeases the algorithm gods. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.